Welcome back, everyone. My name is Caleb Johnson, host of From Trial to Triumph, and today we have Matt Haycox. So, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Caleb. Thanks for having me.
Matt, can you go ahead and give our listeners just a quick background story about yourself?
Sure. I mean, listen, it feels like forever ago for me now, but I mean, my entry into business, or my desire for entry into business, started probably when I was 9, 10, 11 years old. I mean, my dad owned his own business. Nothing to do with what I ended up doing, but he wrote computer software. He had a software company back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I came from an era when I was really told the only way to make big money was to own your own business. So I think, combined with the fact that I had the entrepreneurial father around me, and that I wanted to be rich, I decided that going into business was the way for me. I mean, I spent my very early teenage years absorbing every book, every periodical, every kind of piece of business information I could get my hands on. And believe me, 30 years ago, that was a much harder feat than it is today. There was no internet, no podcast, no whatever. I mean, I was reading black and white textbooks, but I did that for my early teenage years, and then my kind of mid-teens, I tried every business opportunity, every get-rich-quick scheme I could get my hands on, selling blow-up cushions, selling Tamagotchi pets, selling toilet rolls down the local market, anything I could. And then when I finished school, I managed to get my parents to allow me to dodge university for a year, because I felt it was going to hold me back in my quest for riches. And my dad had just invested in a business at the time, selling uniforms, corporate clothing. I went to work in this business initially as a salesperson, and my dad was retired, so this was very much a passive investment for him. And I used to come home from work every night, complaining to my dad about how much they were kind of screwing him in this business. That the existing management team were anything from incompetent to fraudulent, and he had to come back to work and he had to get in and take over because they were kind of running off with his money. And my dad kind of used to say to me, "Look, I agree with you, but I'm kind of worn down. I've had 25 years of running my own business. I've had 30 years of putting up with living with your mother. The last thing I need to do is come and get stuck back into another business." So he just kind of left it. And after probably, I don't know, a month or two of me coming home and giving him grief every night, he eventually turned around one day and said, "You know what? You go and do what you want with it. You can't make a worse job of what they're doing. So crack on." And I went in the next day and I literally fired everybody. Started from scratch. There was this one little old guy in the warehouse who I kind of left in place. But other than that, got rid of all the staff and started completely from scratch. And I always say it wasn't that I knew what I was doing. I just kind of knew what everybody else shouldn't be doing. And I spent the next 3 years starting from scratch with a business that had no customers, no suppliers, no staff. No one wanted to deal with us. No banks wanted to lend us any money, and we really had to start from the bottom. Had to find a new product mix to sell. We had to find a new whole customer demographic to sell to, and that really was an absolute baptism by fire into business for me, and it was 3 years later, I'd taken that business from losing about 300 grand a year to making about 30 grand a year. And it was never that the numbers were very, very big or exciting, but it was just more the principle that I'd been thrown in at the deep end and been given, the biggest learning curve I think any business owner could ask for, never mind an 18-year-old with no experience whatsoever. So it was a fantastic place for me to cut my teeth. And I left there because ultimately I was kind of a bit bored by that point. I think, back then I kind of learnt that running a business long term wasn't really my interest nor my skill set. To be fair, I like to get my hands dirty. Coming up with ideas, trying things out. I guess that kind of cut and thrust of the entrepreneur in the beginning. So it was time for me to leave, and I moved into leisure, because I'd always wanted to work in leisure. I didn't really know why, other than the fact that as a 21, 22-year-old guy, I thought owning a bar was a chance to make a load of money, get drunk for free and meet a load of girls. And that's what I did. I started in leisure, initially ran a couple of pubs and a couple of bars unsuccessfully, and I opened a strip club in 2004. and that was I guess my first real major success. The business logic behind it was that we weren't making enough money just from selling alcohol alone, so we needed other ancillary income streams. So I thought by opening a strip club, I'd be able to earn the money from commissions from the girls. I'd be able to have a higher margin on the alcohol, because we had a captive audience. I'd be able to charge money on the door to get people in as well. And I created a brand and a business model called Wildcats. Opened the first one in 2004. That hit the ground running, and then that's when my story really took off. And over the next 5 years, I became the biggest strip club operator in the UK. I had 11 strip clubs. I had 65 bars and pubs. I had a retail empire, property portfolio, and it was a fantastically, let's say, high turnover and profitable business, especially for what was a 25, 26-year-old guy back then. But it was over leveraged, it was undercapitalized, it was completely built on a house of cards. And in middle of 2008, anyone kind of old enough to remember knew that was the onset of the credit crunch, and the rug was pulled from under us. Our lenders didn't want to lend to us anymore. No one would refinance, and literally in the space of about 4 or 5 weeks, I went from riding high and thinking I was the king of leisure and the king of retail to losing the lot overnight, losing all of the businesses and being declared personally bankrupt. And I was 27 at the time. I had a 1-year-old daughter, a wife at the time as well. And for me, it was I kind of climbed up the ladder to be thrown back down to the bottom with a big jump, and that was I guess start of stage 3 for me. Rebuilding and bringing to where I am today. I went from building my own businesses and borrowing money to lending money and investing in other people's businesses, and that's really how I've grown and spent the last 12 years becoming a lender, becoming an investor, becoming an advisor. I've lent over 500 million to businesses in the UK in the last few years, and as well as giving them money, I always say give them the support so that they don't have to make the mistakes that I've made.
Hi, my friend Caleb Johnson here, and I have a huge question to ask you real estate investors. How would you rate your personal discipline on a scale of 1 to 10? If your answer is anything less than a 10, I have something neat for you. And let me tell you, discipline means pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone and doing things that are difficult and sometimes boring. Achieving massive success requires you to do those difficult things. Now, I just released a program for investors where I walk with you as an accountability coach to help you stay on track, and I'm doing this for free. That's right, for free. But I'm only offering this to the first 5 people who sign up because I don't have availability for more than that. Starting is easy. Go to redccapitalgroup.com and click accountability coaching at the top right of the screen. So let's get to work, and now to the interview.
Mm-hmm. That wasn't a very quick intro, was it? I've kind of taken up the entirety of this podcast. I'm going to have to find a way to condense this story for the future.
No, that was great, man. That was great. I loved it. I love the just openness of that, and I love to ask, what did you learn from what you grew to back then in 2008 to now? So how you don't replicate the crash then.
Well, I mean, look, when you say what did I learn, I mean, I learned so many different things from I guess so many different angles, and I always say that you never learn anything when things go right. You only learn things when things go wrong, and I had so many things go wrong for me that I had so many different learning experiences. But I guess if we pick one thing out of there, which is the over leverage, I guess the biggest thing I learned, which A applies to myself now, but B, I more get to apply to the customers that I deal with, to the borrowers, is A, having a fantastic grasp of your numbers, which is something I just didn't have back then. I didn't have a thorough understanding of the accounts of the business. I didn't know particularly how to understand them enough, nor was my accounting team producing the right information. And secondly, the key to being surrounded by the right people who can help you in the circumstances that you don't understand. I mean, for me, I guess every experience I had as a young business owner was my first experience in that, and some of the experiences or some of the situations I was thrown into were the most complicated and, some of them horrific experiences that, any business owner can ask for. And they'll probably never experience them ever. Certainly probably never experienced them more than once. And, I was either surrounded by no advice or bad advice. And that, ultimately led me down the path of believing my own bullshit, of being very deluded in certain circumstances, and just making the wrong decisions. So I guess if I kind of fast forward it to today, one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to any business owner, well, two things really. One, just because you're in business, I think the first thing any business owner needs to understand is you know nothing. Particularly when you first started in business. And one of my pet hates, and I always give the analogy of sport, is in businesses there's not really a league, and there's not really a barrier to entry. So if you were playing football, and you said, "Oh, I play football." Well, I mean, no one would possibly think that means you're fit to play for Manchester United. You're just, you've just started kicking a ball around on a Sunday. But the problem with business is when somebody starts in business and there are, like inverted commas, a business owner, they almost put themselves akin to, someone who's been in business 10 years, someone who's been in business 20 years, someone who's become a billionaire. And I think the most important thing for any business owner to understand is you know nothing, and the biggest piece of advice they should have is to go and find the right mentors to support them along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that, and I think so many people, they can get into business and again, air quotes on business, for a year, and then they can say they're a CEO, they're a founder, and so that's a great. You can leverage that when you're starting off so that you sound more credible, but at the same time, be careful with that because you can really maybe get too hot-headed and think that you're all that when you just have to learn, and that really just comes through, Matt, like you said, experience. These guys that have 10, 20 years of experience, and that's how you learn that. Now, Matt, you said another thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the simple thing for me is it comes down to not believing your own bullshit. And you may want to go out there in a sales environment or when you're representing your business, and obviously you've got to put your best foot forward. You've got to, or let's say, fake it till you make it, or pretend that you've got that knowledge because you don't want people to look down on you or take advantage of you. But the key is that when you go home in private, you don't tell yourself that same story, and you go and do whatever it takes to learn in all the areas that you're lacking.
Mm-hmm. Matt, you talked about understanding the numbers, and what does that mean? Because I'm an underwriter of real estate offerings, so that can mean underwriting, or that can mean just keeping track of all your properties. And so for you, what does that mean?
I mean, I think for me it means having a very accurate financial understanding of whatever the metrics of your particular business are, and tracking them accordingly. And what I find very worrying with most of the businesses that I talk to, that no matter how big a business is, whether it's big, whether it's small, I always find that the business owner, the CEO, either has no understanding of or no interest in the numbers of that business. And so often, I'll get a deal to underwrite, a loan to underwrite, and I'll look at a set of accounts. And by the way, often that's a blessing to even get a set of accounts to look at, because so often I'll deal with a business where they've got no up to date financial information in the last 10, 11, 12 months. So, first of all, you've got to have the information. Secondly, you've got to understand it. And very often I'll ask a question to the business owner about the accounts, what's that number? Why is this thing in a particular area? And they always say, they always defer to their accountant and say, oh, I don't understand that kind of stuff, but I've got an accountant that deals with it, or I've got a financial advisor that deals with it. And, I'm not pretending that, a CEO has the time or ultimately the knowledge to run every single aspect of their business. But I think one of the biggest things, I think skills a business owner needs to learn is to be able to understand enough of each different department to maybe not to be able to replace those people, but certainly to make sure they can't get the wool pulled over their eyes. And in no department is it more important to me than finance. The numbers of your business, both from a profitability and particularly a cash flow perspective, are the absolute lifeblood of continuing to be in business. The very fine difference between success and failure. And it's just absolutely imperative that not only do you have a solid grasp of what the numbers are, but you also have a solid knowledge of how to understand them too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important, especially in any business that you're in. And there's a learning curve in there too, right? Usually 6 months, and it really depends on how immersed you put yourself into that. If you're diving into the numbers for 6 months, or if you're gonna sporadically do it over the next 2 years, you have to get inundated with the numbers and really understand how the business works, right? And Matt, after 2008, after that crash, how did you come up from that?
I always say that I don't have an exciting answer for this. People always ask that question, thinking that they're about, going to get this really motivational kind of, general to war, kind of cry speech. But the reality is that the way I saw it was I just didn't have a choice. And look, at the point that I went bankrupt, at the point that I lost everything, I had a lot of people around me, whether they were, let's say, inverted commas, friends, whether they were advisors, basically telling me that, life as I knew it was over, that, I'd never work again, my credibility was over. But for me, it was nothing really more complicated than I feel I had two choices. I could sit at home and I could, watch Jerry Springer and cry in front of the TV about, how my life was finished and how I was a victim and blah, blah, blah. Or I could go back out to work again and find a way to put food on the table for my 1-year-old daughter and for my wife, and to pay the mortgage. And I always say that was, for me, it wasn't a choice. I had a family to support. I was never born to be poor. And I kind of had to get back out there, put my ego to one side, get back on the horse and start working again. And ultimately that's what I did. I had a skill, an accidentally learnt skill as a finance broker, really. I'd spent the previous 5 or 6 years learning how to borrow money for my own businesses, learning about niche lenders, alternative lenders that my peers didn't even know existed. So I kind of developed a bit of a name as the go-to guy to raise finance, and that was a skill set that I had to be able to go and get paid and start putting some food on the table. And it was nothing more than making that decision to go out and get paid, and not sit at home and cry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, Matt, our net worth is our network. And so how can you tell or help someone network better?
So networking is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I very much say that all of the success of the last 20 plus years of my business career, I can kind of pinpoint each point of success, and every one of those events has been down to a relationship with a particular person I've had, that I've kind of found and nurtured that person. And look, I could talk about networking for hours on end, but if I'm giving a 30-second summary of where people go wrong, I think first of all, people don't like networking, or people give it a bad name because they do it wrong. They do it wrong because they don't have a plan in place. And whilst networking almost looks like a friendly collection of people getting together and trying to do a bit of business, for me it needs planning, like any other business activity in life. And my networking is very thought out. It's very targeted. I know exactly who I want to meet, and now whether that's an individual person, whether I think, Caleb's a guy that I know is in the same space as me that I can particularly do a deal with, and whether I go out and search you out, or whether I just know that I need people that fit a particular demographic and they're going to be at a particular event or in a particular room. But I always go out with a purpose. I never just walk in there and think, let's just meet some people and see what happens. Even if I'm just meeting some people, they're still people from a certain demographic that I've picked. Secondly, I always like to control the situation, control the environment. If I can put on and host the event, I will do. But even though I'm going in to kind of ultimately try and build a relationship to do some business with these people, I go in with the longest of long-term views. You know, I never think, oh, I've got to go and transact this tomorrow. If it takes me 10 years to, you know, build and nurture that relationship until we do a deal, and it takes me 10 years, and if I've done many things for you along the way, then I'll do as many things as it takes to, you know, to bring value to, you know, to bring value to that relationship. And if that ultimately never pays off into a deal for me, then so be it. You know, I always think as long as I've picked the right people, and ultimately it will pay off either commercially or just enriching my life in some kind of way. And really, I guess that's the kind of 2-minute summary of how I do my networking. I think one of the other big points is if I'm trying to network with a person who, let's say, has much more money than me, or is a wealthy person anyway, this is always an area where I guess where people struggle. You know, I always try and offer them some kind of, you know, something that they can't do. You know, whether that's a skill set that I can bring to the table, or whether that's a favour I can do for their kids or their family. But you know, ultimately, you know, when you're trying to get in front of these people and you're cold calling them saying, oh, can I take you for lunch? Can I buy you a coffee? They don't give a shit about lunch or a coffee with you. You know, they can go and buy their own lunch. They can go and buy their own tickets to the football. You know, if you really want to find a way to get into them, you know, you need to bring something to the table that they haven't got. And that may sound like money, but you know, many times it's not money. It's just doing something to set yourself apart from others.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That was gold, Matt. And so those things were first, it's so important to find the people that are actually the deal makers, right? There's usually a handful of people in the industry that are killing it. And so if you can get in front of them and, like you said, add value to them, that's more than just a cup of coffee or lunch. And yeah, I like people buying me lunch and I like people buying me coffee, but there's got to be more meat there for it to really hit home and add value. And then also remember, it's a long-term game, right? You know, especially starting off with no money, no resources, that can be hard because you got to make money. And so, but you also have to keep in mind is that find the ways that you can make money, but still network. That's a long-term play. And if you find the industry that you want to be in for a really long time, it is really valuable to network with those people that are the deal makers and don't expect, you know, the deal to happen tomorrow. Like you said, Matt, it could happen in 10 years, but as long as you add value to them and you stay connected and you aren't just the guy asking him for money or asking him for a deal, but you're there and you're a resource to them how they need it. And that's gold, brother. I love that. Pivoting a bit, we've talked a lot about money, and I've been there where it's always been about money, and then life has kind of gone down the toilet for me whenever I've been there. So for you, Matt, what is kind of your big why and what's more to money to you?
You know, I think for me, I like building things. I like, you know, creating things or solving problems, and I like, you know, I very much like to achieve something when other people say it can't be done. So I think, you know, they're my, I guess, I'm not going to say they're my only reasons, because again, I think, you know, it's quite often easy to want to pretend that the money doesn't play a part, because look, you know, the money does play a part for me, and if it didn't, you know, I'd be sat at home watching Netflix all day and playing with the kids or eating out with my friends, because, you know, all of the things that go with work, you know, bring its own stresses and bring its own problems as well. But ultimately, you know, there's more good than bad. And I guess, you know, once it gets past that base level of making some money, it's the fact that, you know, I want to, like I said, I want to build something. I want to work with people that I want to work with. You know, I want to have a story to tell, and I want to have built something to be proud of.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Now, Matt, we're going to go ahead and go to the final 3 questions, and the first one is, if you can give a book recommendation, what would that be?
You know what? I'm a big reader. I say big reader. I'm putting more into audio books now than reading, so I get to multitask. But something I'm actually reading at the moment, which I've read multiple times before, but I always keep going back to, is the Russell Brunson. I don't know what he calls the series, like the traffic secrets series, where he's got .com secrets and traffic secrets and expert secrets, which are a fantastic collection of marketing related books. I mean, obviously they're written with an e-com slant on to ultimately be a part of the sales funnel to click funnels, but they have absolutely timeless fundamental marketing principles, whether it's for e-com, for bricks and mortar, or anything else. I mean, I would seriously recommend that collection of books to anybody, whether you're in business, thinking about starting in business. To understand those marketing principles are fundamental to success.
Mm-hmm. And the second question is, if people want to learn more about you and maybe get in touch with you, where's the best place that they can do that at?
So you can get me all over the internet. I'm on all things social. I put a lot of content out there. I'm at the Matt Haycox. That's TheMattHaycox. I've also got a podcast, which is the Matt Haycox Show. I've got a website where we put daily blogs, daily content, which is at matt-haycox.com. And on there you can also subscribe to my newsletter that goes out every week. So yeah, you can kind of consume me in whatever content format you like.
And Matt, the final question is, if you can share one final thing with our listeners that they can take away from today's show, what would that be?
The value of partnerships. I think it's something that I didn't appreciate enough in my younger years. I was very much approaching things probably with a big sense of ego. I used to want to own everything. I wanted to be the big boss, the 100% shareholder. And don't get me wrong, you can still make money in that way. But I've learned over the last kind of 5 to 10 years that I can go a lot further and a lot quicker by partnering up with other people. It's got to be the right people, and they've got to bring something different to me to the table. But now I would much rather have a smaller piece of a bigger pie and have lots more pies than be the king of a small hill. So I think don't underestimate the value of partnerships.
Mm-hmm. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being here. I gleaned a lot from our conversation, and I know our listeners will as well. So, especially that bit about networking, I'd love that. So I really appreciate your time, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Tanner. Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
It's time to grab your victory. Find us on the web at redseacapitalgroup.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Red Sea Capital Group.